everyone. Welcome. I'll give you a few minutes to get on because I know a lot of you like to watch it live rather than on YouTube or on the Family Church page. So I'll just wait for a few of you to come on, but it's so good to be here with you today. So good to be able to meet up in this way and talk about the Bible. Again, if this is the first time you're catching on with us at our Bible study, what we did is in March, we decided, we as in me, I decided that we were doing independent Bible studies just about different topics. And then I got the idea that, a lot of times we read the Bible and we don't fully know the whole story of the Bible, so that the individual things in the Bible don't make a lot of sense. So to read it in context. So we started from Genesis back in, I believe, March. And we did an overview of every book of the Bible, and we are now today going to be discussing Song of Songs, or it's also called Song of Solomon. And rather than getting very in-depth into the book and picking apart different verses, although we do that, we discuss each book of the Bible kind of as a whole, as an overview, so that we can get a better understanding of what the author of that particular book was trying to bring out, what point they were making, who the main characters are, what the main verses are, and how it all fits together in one beautiful, cohesive message of redemption, because that's what the Bible offers us, redemption, redemption from the sin of all mankind, from our personal sin, and to be back in relationship with God. And so that's what we've been doing. So I'm imagining you're all together now. We're all on there. Did you get your cup of tea? Everybody got their cup of tea or their cup of coffee? I know you think I'm just trying to, not get into what I'm going to talk about today, because basically I feel like I'm going to be giving a bunch of teenagers the talk. And that's not what's going to happen today. But this isn't even in my notes, that I was very tempted to skip this week, but not skip it. What I was going to do is just not do Song of Solomon, not do Song of Songs, because it is very saucy, there's sexual overtones to it that at first when I was reading it, I thought, because I've read it before, and I was very blessed by the book because I have looked at it in one of the ways you'll see as our relationship with Christ, and Christ as our husband, and we are his bride, and have been very blessed in that way. But I thought, I'm just so out of my comfort zone to be talking about this topic, this subject, about married life. Now, let me just say right here, don't turn it off and don't say, oh, this is about marriage. This is not for married people. This is for all people, because there are many ways to look at the book of Song of Solomon. This is not just, this is a book for married people. I'm not married. I don't need that. This is not just for married people. There are many levels and many layers to the book of Song of Solomon. This book, there are elements of this book that you can preach to children. When I say children, I mean let's say teens. If you're talking to young teens and giving them the talk. There's so many important things that you can bring out in Song of Solomon to children. So you can talk to children. There's things primarily for women. There's things primarily just for men. There's things for couples. There's things for those who are engaged, for those who have been married for years and years and years, for those who want to be married one day. This is a perfect book for you to be reading, looking at, and there's elements of this and wisdom in here that if you begin these things now, then when you get to meet someone and when you get into a relationship, you're going to be on more solid ground, because you're going to have a better understanding of how things ought to be. Excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of this. Why don't we go and dig right in, okay? And I want to apologize in advance because I have my little dog running around here. When I shut her out, she gets very distressed and she starts to bark. So I can't shut her out the room. So she's in here with me, my little dog. And every once in a while, something outside disturbs her and she'll start barking like crazy. In which case, my lovely helper over here, which is my daughter, will grab her and take her out. So don't be upset if you hear a little yap yap in the background. Okay, so let's get started. Let's talk about this. You know, I was going to skip it and just like pretend like maybe they won't know and they'll think, you know, this is the book we were on, because we would be then going on to the book of Isaiah, which I'm really more in my comfort zone in the book of Isaiah, being it is one of my favorite books of the Old Testament, like my really, really favorite books. If you look at it in my Bible, it is completely marked up, and it is like notes in the margins, and just years of just meditating on beautiful messages in Isaiah. But I said, God, what do you want me to talk about? There goes my dog. There she goes. Someone comes to the door. Okay. Can you shut the front door? Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry about that. Okay, there we go. Dog's gone. I forget what I was even saying. Oh, okay. I was praying and I said, God, do you really want me to talk about the Song of Solomon? Like, what do you want me to say? I'm so out of my comfort zone. And then I almost felt like God said, good, I'm glad you're out of your comfort zone, because, you know, then you're going to rely more on me for what you need to be saying. So I really prayed about this week, and I said, God, what do you want people to hear? What do you want me to hear? What do you want me to know about this book? What shall I share about this book? You know, I'll do it even if I'm cringing and turning red. I'll do it. That's okay, Lord. So God was gracious and good, and he gave me so many things that I could talk to you about today. So let's first talk about some of the particulars. How about the title? Song of Solomon, but it's also called Song of Songs. Okay, well, it's called Song of Solomon, obviously, because it is believed that it was a song or poetry, so it would have been read to music or sung to music, written by King Solomon. And in Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verse 1, it alludes, well, it says, I, Solomon, blah, 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 you know, written this, okay? So he outright says it's Solomon. But it could have been written by someone about Solomon, so they're writing in honor of their king. Most traditional scholars would say that he actually wrote it, and that it's not just a tribute to him. I tend to think it was him, but I'm not sure, okay? I'm not 100% sure. Most scholars would say yes. Okay, it's also called Song of Songs. Now, King Solomon, it says in another book of the Bible, 1 Kings 4:32, it says, he spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs numbered 1,005. So he wrote many songs, 1,005. But none remain of those songs. This is the only song, but that is okay, because it is the song of all songs. It's his greatest hit, okay? This is his big hit for the world, and it is a hit. I mean, it's in every Bible, isn't it? So, you know, Bible's the bestseller on the earth, and it has been for years and years and years. So he is a best-selling writer and a best-selling song person. Okay, there you go. But the reason Song of Songs being his best song, but because it's also, they're not exactly sure if it wasn't written by Solomon, then you wouldn't call it the Song of Solomon, would you? You would just call it by what it was, which was a great song, the Song of all songs. Okay, so the date of this would be about 970 BC. So that was around the time that Solomon was king. Okay, so there are a few ways, but not all the ways, believe me, that scholars have interpreted the book of Song of Songs. I'll be calling it Song of Songs and Song of Solomon both, so just bear with me as I say it. Okay, there's a few ways to interpret it, and it's kind of important how you interpret it. There's the allegorical way, okay, big word, don't be scared by it. All it means is that the things in the story stand for other things, such as, if you haven't read this book yet, there's two lovers in it, a man and a woman. And the man would be the husband, and he would stand for God. So in an allegorical way, he would stand for God. And the woman, sorry, she doesn't have a name in this, but she is called the Shulamite, and she's called the Shulamite because of where she comes from, okay? Just like I'm from originally New York, so I'd be a New Yorker. Well, she was a Shulamite. And the Shulamite would represent the Jewish people. So this is how, for many years, Hebrew people interpreted this book. They would look at God as the husband, the Shulamite as the Jewish people, and the relationship of God to his people. Christians also look at this in an allegorical way, and they interpret it this way, as the man being like Christ, the husband, and the Shulamite, his bride, the church. Okay, so there are ways to look at it. There's the historical view. Now, the historical view would say that this was an actual event in Solomon's life, and he singled out one of his relationships, because we know this about Solomon, that he had many relationships. He had about 700 wives, but not just that, he had a lot of concubines as well. So in total, it was 1,000 women in his life. That's a lot of women. So, anyway, so that apparently he may have singled out one of those relationships and wrote about it in poetic form. But the argument against this is the fact that he had many, many wives. And if you look at Song of Songs or Song of Solomon, it's a lover's poem about exclusivity, one to another, monogamy, just one with the other and nobody else. And Solomon was not that if he had all these hundreds of wives, okay? So that is one argument against it having been Solomon who wrote it. And some people say that it is someone who just wrote this as a tribute for Solomon. Okay, then there's the drama view, the view of it as just being dramatic poetry. So some people have looked at this as a drama. They see two main characters in this drama. Some see three characters, and it's the way you read it. Some see three characters. They see the king, who is Solomon, the Shulamite, the woman, and then a humble shepherd, because sometimes the king is spoke of in terms of being a shepherd. Okay, but some people say, no, he's a completely different character. And it is the way in which you read it. They're not entirely wrong to say there's three characters if you read it that way. Solomon tries in this way with the three characters. It's more Solomon trying to seduce the Shulamite away from her true love, the humble shepherd, if you look at it in that sense. Then there's the two-character drama that some people see it as, which is just Solomon and the Shulamite, and they are expressing their love to one another in beautiful, beautiful poetry. There are many, many more opinions on how to view this. Some really way out there. I'm like, wow, I'm not even going to go there, And it all has to do with the scholar who was interpreting it, or the person who was interpreting it. And some people, and this is a more modern view. When I say modern, I don't mean like just, in the last year. I mean the last, maybe many, many years. Okay, love poetry. That it is looked at by some scholars as a simple celebration of romantic and sexual love between a man and a woman in an established marital relationship. And some people look at it quite literally. This is love poetry about a married couple. And today we're going to look at this primarily as love poetry, as what I just said, the simple celebration of marriage between two people. And I'm also going to look at it in an allegorical way. I'm not here to decide the best way to interpret it. This is the way I'm going to tell you. These are the ways I'm going to share with you. They are the most popular views. I think that's how I should share it with you and talk about it, so that when you read this on your own, you have a better and a fuller understanding. But by all means, do your own research as well. Go to commentaries. Commentaries are great. They tell you all the ways. They give you lots of different insights. Very, very good way to read into books of the Bible is look at some commentaries. Okay, so what's the purpose of Song of Songs? What is the purpose? Well, I guess this would be based on how you interpret the Song of Solomon or Song of Songs. But being that this was most likely written by King Solomon, remember what he wrote that we've also discussed. He wrote the book of Proverbs, which we looked at 2 weeks ago. And this was a book on how godly wisdom applied to our everyday lives can bring us success right here in our natural lives, in our relationships, in our finances, in how we rear our children, okay, in all different ways, all areas of life. Ecclesiastes, we looked at that. Solomon also wrote that. Again, it's about seeking out the wisdom on the purpose and the meaning of life. Again, a wisdom book, okay? So, Song of Solomon is love poetry, which probably does represent the love of God for Israel, and to the Christian, the love of Christ for his church, the bride, right? And the love of his church, his bride, for him. But on a literal level, It's been written to glorify marriage and wedded love, okay? Some scholars look at Song of Songs, listen to this, as the wisdom of God for a good marriage. So it's not different from those other books of Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. It's just more flowery and poetic, and the wisdom could almost be lost a little in it, but if you look closely, it's in there, the wisdom. And many counselors use the book of Song of Solomon as both premarital counseling, post-marital counseling, so after a person's been married, and they use the principles from Song of Songs to instruct on how to have foundations for a good marriage. And it's in there. I've read it, and there are many things, much wisdom in there. Here's a quote from an article called History of Interpretation of the Song of Songs by a man called J. Paul Tanner. And I want to read this because it has this quote really hit the nail on the head in the purpose of Song of Solomon, for me anyway. Okay, so here's the quote. The purpose of the book is to extol human love and marriage. Though at first this seems strange, on reflection, it's not surprising for God to have included in the biblical canon a book endorsing the beauty and purity of marital love. Since the world views sex so sordidly and perverts and exploits it so persistently, and since so many marriages are crumbling because of lack of love, commitment, and devotion, it is advantageous. It's to our advantage to have a book in the Bible that gives God's endorsement of marital love as a wholesome and pure thing. Okay? So that really makes sense to me, that quote. When I read that, I thought, actually, it's important that I talk about Song of Solomon because I believe marriages are under attack and relationships are under attack, especially during this time of COVID-19, where people are in much closer quarters, spending a lot more time together than they normally would. Some people are working from home. You've got a husband working from home, a wife working from home. Sometimes the kids are working from home if schools, ask them to stay home. That's a lot of being in each other's way and in each other's face. And, if there were any cracks in that relationship at all, boy, I tell you, being locked in together is going to bring that out. And marriages are under attack. And I hear it all the time about how people just aren't doing anything about it right now. They're not seeking help because help's really hard to get right now because people aren't working like normal. So it's hard to get someone who'll sit or do Zoom calls about your marriage, about counseling. So marriages are under attack. And, we see from the television, from the news, and in every way, attacks upon marriage and about the purity of sexuality in marriage, okay? So in the poem, we have King Solomon and a woman called the Shulamite. Like I said, that's where she's from. So they court, which is dating, then they engage, and then they join in a covenant relationship of marriage. And they enjoy a sexual relationship within marriage. Now, there's 8 chapters. It's not a huge book. You could read it. It's quite easy reading. You have to sometimes read some parts of it slow because it's very flowery and there's so much metaphor. Boy, there's so much, they don't outright say sometimes sexual things, but they will use metaphors for sexual things and for descriptions of each other, for descriptions of their love, descriptions of how they're feeling, and they use a lot of metaphor, and sometimes you have to read into that a little bit. But it's not a problem. Remember what I always say, read a version of the Bible that you understand. Don't be religious about it. Don't say, I must read the King James Version, that's the real version with all the these and the thous. It's not. The real version is the version that you understand, okay? So if you have to read it in the Message, read it in the Message. In the Living Bible, read it in the Living Bible. New King James, whatever. Read what works for you, that you understand it, okay? So this book has been considered a little too sexual, and therefore some have deemed it inappropriate to be in the Bible. But by some people who, if you're looking at it according to that quote that I saw, every single day we're looking at things on the television that point out how sexuality is a dirty, filthy, sordid thing done in the darkness, the devil perverts what God made beautiful. And the Song of Songs points out what God made beautiful. And that's the point of the book, I believe, to some degree, is that what God made is not filthy and dirty and impure. The devil takes everything and twists it and perverts it. And he wants us, that little shameful feeling that I talked about, that I'm embarrassed to talk about this. Where does that come from? If God made something and it is beautiful, then where does that feeling come from? That feeling of, oh, I don't want to talk about this. That's not good. And we need to do away with that as Christians. When we talk to our children about sexuality, when we talk to our spouses, even when we're in conversation with friends, we need to take the perverseness and the thought that it is perverse out of sexuality in marriage, okay? So marriage is seen in the world as an end of fun and sexual enjoyment, okay? They even give derogatory names to people in a partnership, in a marriage, like the wife will become the ball and chain, They actually call a woman that. Oh, she's the ball and chain, like now I'm being punished. I'm married now, Or, sometimes on the television we see that having a mistress or an extramarital relationship, someone outside of your spouse, having that is seen as, that's just inevitable, an inevitable end to a marriage or, part of the marriage. Or some people even see it as a spicy addition, something as a good thing to have, their little bit of person on the side there that they don't talk about, or they don't tell about. And that's how it's sold to us by the media, by television shows, these terrible novels that portray sexuality in such a perverse little romp, and you can almost feel the filthiness off of it. The thought of being monogamous, just one husband and one wife, and that's it, faithful to each other for the rest of your life. It's not always seen as a happy thought by worldly standards, okay? Not everyone thinks that's great. Song of Songs, however, shows that the sexual life of a married couple should be exclusive, exciting, joyful, and satisfying. And that is God's plan. And that's what this book points out. Now, again, if you're not married and you're like, ooh, I don't want to talk about this, please bear with me, because we're going to talk about this on a spiritual level as well. And it has nothing to do with marriage in the natural, but everything to do with your relationship with God. The book of Song of Songs helps us to understand that God is not a prude, even if people are. Even if people get embarrassed. Even if, whole eras of time in history, like the Victorian era, where people were very prudish, you do not speak of these things. God is not a prude. And that is one reason why this book is in the Bible. He wanted you to know, and me to know, and the world to know. He created sexuality. He knows how it works best. And he wants you to know it's not a dirty and filthy thing when it's done according to his principles. As a matter of fact, it's life-giving and it's beautiful. Okay, here is a quote by Eugene Peterson, the writer of the Message Bible, or the interpretation of the Bible, that is the Message Bible. In his introduction to the Song of Songs, okay, this is what he said. There are some who would eliminate sex when they speak of love, supposing that they're making it more holy. Others, when they think of sex, never think of love. The Song of Songs proclaims an integrated wholeness that is at the center of Christian teaching on committed, wedded love for a world that seems to specialize in loveless sex. Okay, because that pretty much points out what the world is like, They're in it for not necessarily the love, but they're there for the very base animalistic pleasure of it, and that's it. No love attached. That's not how it is with God. Okay, so who created marriage to begin with? God, okay? God did. Adam and Eve were the first two people who were married, okay? Now, in Matthew, this is the New Testament, Matthew 19, verses 1 through 12, Jesus himself has a whole conversation about divorce. So it's about marriage as well, with some religious people who wanted to trap him in his words. And they thought, let's talk about this area of marriage and divorce. So Jesus ultimately brings the conversation back to this. And this is what Jesus says. He said to them, have you not read that he who made them in the first place, that is God, he who made them in the first place made them man and woman? It says, for this reason, a man will leave his father and his mother and will live with his wife. This is Jesus, his own words, talking about marriage, okay? He's God, all right? Remember that. Jesus is God. And he's pointing out that God made marriage, that God made man and woman in the beginning in marriage. It was his idea, all right? Now, before I go on any further, I know I'm going to be talking to not just single people, not just people who want to be married one day, but people who have experienced divorce. And I want you to know right now that in Christ there is no more condemnation. Do not feel condemnation if you have been through divorce, okay? I don't know why. I'm not judging you. I am not judging you, okay? Nothing that I'm saying today is to slap your hand, shame on you, you divorced person. No way, no way. You know, we live in a fallen world, and the things that God made and the way that God wanted everything, we see that in this world, that this is a broken world. And there are marriages that don't work out, okay? There are marriages where they're not going to work out because that other person could be violent. They could just be someone who rejects you, throws you out, or maybe there's a myriad of reasons. There is no judgment, okay? If you are a child of God, God forgives you for whatever, okay? Whatever you've done, his love is big enough to cover you, big enough to heal your broken heart and help you through difficult times. And if you are in a marriage, and right now it is not great, you know, let me just speak to you and just say, God is for you. He is not against you. He wants your marriage to work, you know. If there's anything in you that wants your marriage to work, I want this to work. I want it to be right. I want everything to be right. I just don't know how to make that happen. Well, keep listening, okay? Because maybe there's something in this for you. Keep listening because, again, like I said, this isn't just about natural marriage. This is about our relationships with God as well, okay? And he speaks to us throughout the Bible in many places about our lives with him being like a marriage. So I have to talk about this. It's important, okay? But there's no condemnation. No condemnation if you're in divorce, okay? If you've had a divorce, all right? If you're going through a divorce, all right? Okay, so marriage was God's idea. So if God made marriage, then he knows how it works best. And how is that? How does it work best? It works best with this covenant relationship, okay? What's a covenant relationship? Well, let's talk about our covenant relationship with God, okay? A covenant relationship with God looks like this. He is ours and we are his. That's what a covenant relationship is. He is my God and I am his child. He is my father, I am his child. And that is a marriage covenant. Our relationship with God, he is mine and I am his, is so similar to a marriage covenant. Covenant relationship is spoken of in Exodus chapter 6, verse 7. And this speaks of our relationship with God, or what the Hebrew people's relationship with God was meant to be. This is God speaking. I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God. And you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who has brought you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, okay? I'm going to take you to be mine, okay? Not just you mine, I'm yours. I'm there for you as much as you are there for me. So God not only invented marriage, but he also likens it to our relationship with him by calling us, his church, his bride, okay? Marriage to God is a representation of our relationship with him. And if that's the case, oh, here we go, yappy dog. Someone come and take my dog, please. I do apologize for this. Thank you very much. Just take her away. She got excited about that bit about marriage. Sorry about that. Okay. All right, what was I saying? Okay, so if marriage to God is a representation of our relationship with Him, in that case, then marriage should be something, right? If this is our relationship, a representation of our relationship with God, then marriage on this earth should be something that represents life and joy and beauty, and everything is to be united, right? It's just this union with God, all right? And it's beautiful, and it expresses beauty, and others see the beauty in it as well as us experiencing that beauty. Therefore, we see the picture of marriage in Song of Solomon as one that represents being joined to God, and we see the beauty of that relationship, how the beauty just exudes from this relationship. Okay, and there are times in the poem that it's almost like the Garden of Eden. So as you go reading through it, as you see the imagery and the metaphor, sometimes they're in a garden and they look up and there's the boughs of the trees that they see, and they speak of the flowers and the springtime, and they speak of the beauty of nature around them, okay? It's going to be very much like Garden of Eden imagery. I'm talking Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve, okay? They're not in it, but it's like the imagery of that. It's almost like metaphors for that. Where humans, remember in the Garden of Eden, humans were separated from God by sin. There was brokenness between the husband and wife, Adam and Eve. Remember, they were both trying to blame each other for, she made me do it, he made me do it. And then after they fell in sin and disobeyed God, they were ashamed of their bodies. They covered themselves up. They didn't even know they were naked before. There was no shame. You know, they were just like walking around and they didn't know they were naked till their eyes were open to the fact that there was a bit of shame there, okay? Then they knew they were naked. There's an article by a woman called Caitlin Richards. The article is called Song of Songs, A Return to the Garden and a Vision of Relational Healing. Okay, that's what the article's called. And it touches on this subject of there being imagery from the Garden of Eden and from the fall of man in Song of Songs. And the writer of that article quotes another woman called Ellen Davis. Now, Ellen Davis is an Old Testament scholar and a professor at Duke Divinity School. And she offers, this is a quote, by the way, she offers a unique perspective for understanding the Song of Songs. She proposes the poet has a vision of healing in mind on multiple relational levels. So the woman who read this, Ellen Davis, proposed this theory when she read it, and it really makes sense that everything we see broken in Genesis, in the garden, in the relationship, in the brokenness of between the divine and the human, the brokenness between male and female, the brokenness between the human and creation, because that's all spoken of in when the curse came, all that brokenness, that you see the healing in Song of Songs. Let's point some of that out. Okay. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 16, after the fall, it says, God says to the woman, your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. But in Song of Songs, chapter 7, verse 10, it says, the woman is saying this, I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me. We see a healing of something there. We see that before he was going to rule over her, but now his desire is for me. He sees me. He loves me. You know, we're on par with one another. Okay, so there's a bit of healing happening there. Also, if you remember in Genesis, there was a curse put on the ground in nature. After Adam and Eve fell, there were going to be weeds that would grow up, and Adam would have to toil the ground for his sustenance in order to eat. He was going to get rid of weeds, and the weeds were going to grow up. But in Song of Solomon, we see this picture. It says, there's a beautiful example where the poet writes, for behold, the winter is past, the rain is over and gone, the flowers appear on the earth, the time of singing has come, and the voice of the turtle dove is heard in the land. All of a sudden, as this couple is falling deeper in love in their marital relationship, we see the healing of nature. Even nature responds to the bond of this healing happening. Another quote from the article is, as the lovers respond to one another and cultivate a deeper intimacy, Creation thrives and mirrors the former Edenic harmony. Okay? So that brokenness in the garden is shown as restored in the book of Song of Solomon. I just absolutely love that, because I believe the whole entire Bible is a book of redemption, leading us, every book, up to the pinnacle of when Jesus gives his life for us, dies on the cross, rises again from the dead, and our sins are forgiven. We have risen with him in Christ. Redemption, and I believe the whole Bible, including Song of Songs, would have redemption in it. So what is actually happening in the Song of Songs? Okay, this is poetry. And some scholars thought it was all just separate poems, like it's 8 chapters, so 8 poems with no real cohesion to any of them. Just 8 separate poems about love, about a married couple. Nothing really connecting the chapters. But the characters throughout remain the same. And if you look at it, there's a progression of their love growing from chapter 1 to chapter 8. And so although there's no real deep plot, like let's say in the book of Ruth or in the book of Esther, the progression of their love between the two characters gives the book somewhat of a structure, okay? So it's the progression of their love that we sort of look at as the structure of the book, okay? And we are going to discuss that progress and those stages in a moment. Here's a quick synopsis of the story within the poem, so that when you go to read the poem of Song of Songs, you know what's going on. Okay, so we start out with the Shulamite woman. She's a country woman, a young lady. She's a field worker and probably of very humble means. And we know this because there's a point where she's ashamed of her looks. And she's been working out in the hot sun. Her skin's been, burnt a bit by the sun. She's darkened by the sun. And she points that out. And she says, oh, I've been working in the fields. It's a sign to the people that she's been working in the fields, the darkness of her skin. And she does most of the talking in the poem. And it's mostly centered on the Shulamite woman. Then we have the next character, which is the male lover, who is Solomon. He's a king. And he falls for this peasant woman in a big way, okay? He describes her beauty in detail. He speaks of her hair being like a flock of goats. I mean, we all want to be told our hair looks like a flock of goats. But remember when this is being written, thousands of years ago. And, if he is a king and a shepherd, then he's going to convey the beauty and some beautiful things in nature that he's seen. And to him, when he talks about her hair, he's talking about the sheep of Kedar, who are black sheep, running down the side of the hill. And as she lets down her long black hair, he says, your hair is like the sheeps of Kedar, just like almost like running down a mountain, this beautiful black hair. I mean, to him, this is like, wow, you look like the sheeps of Kedar. Gorgeous. Oh, and I love this, how he talks about her teeth being like clean, shorn sheep. And he mentions that she has all her teeth, which is always a plus, isn't it, right? Right? Ooh, well, there you go. Old-fashioned beauty there, biblical beauty. Have lush hair and all your teeth. There you go. Okay, then there are, in the story, the daughters of Jerusalem, who are ladies without a lot of experience of love. They're going to be the friends of the Shulamite woman, probably near her age, so also young ladies of the community. And they're friends of the Shulamite young lady. They are sort of her confidants, her cheerleaders. They show that the point of them is that they show that the relationship between her and the shepherd or Solomon is celebrated by the people of their town, of where they are. It's a good relationship in the eyes of the community. And then there are the brothers, okay? They are actual brothers of the Shulamite young lady, and they call the Shulamite their little sister, and they want to protect her purity until marriage. This is a beautiful picture, because if you're looking at this in the allegorical way of a Christian, looking at this as the Shulamite is the bride of Christ, and the husband is Christ. Then the brothers, right? They represent the people who are in our lives, our Christian brothers and sisters, so to speak. And they should be watching out we should be watching out for each other, not causing each other to stumble and fall, especially in the way of sexuality. You know, there's so much to say about modesty. You know, modesty doesn't mean, oh, I'm just going to cover up to my neck and, you know, feel like I'm a big prude. You know what modesty says? Modesty, when we dress modest, and I mean men and women, this is not just for the women, I mean all Christians, okay? Modesty says, what's underneath these clothes is holy, and I respect what's underneath these clothes. And you know what? It's for the one that I have eyes for, the one that God has for me. And that's, you know, my body is not to be on display for the whole world to see, you know, all its nooks and crannies. You know, that is not the way it's meant to be. My body is a holy and a beautiful thing, and it's important and it's special, and I am modest because I respect myself too much to put it all on display. Okay, so the brothers are there to help the Shulamite and help maintain her purity and keep the wolves away, you know. So there are three sections, three things that happen in this beautiful poetry. There's the courtship, that's the dating time, the time that the Shulamite expresses that she has feelings for Solomon. She's not very sure of herself, you know, remember in the beginning about her looks, and she's just meeting him and she's like, oh goodness, you know, I don't look my best and everything. And then, but Solomon, he's like, you're beautiful. You are just the most gorgeous thing I've ever seen. You got all your teeth, girl. Come on. All right. Then there's the wedding. So we have the courtship. So then the engagement / the wedding. Okay. So here the man describes the beauty of his new wife. Okay. And this is where some of the scholars have thought that the language is beautiful, it's poetic, but it is very sexual in its overtones, okay? And a little bit of its undertones too, okay? I'm just putting it out there. But it is beautiful writing. It is there is probably not much more beautiful poetry out there that is so sincere, so beautiful, so pure, so honest about a husband speaking about his wife, about a wife speaking about their husband. It is beautiful, but it is very sexual. Okay, the marriage. Okay, this is, so the courtship, the wedding. Now the marriage. Now the marriage is not the wedding. The wedding is the actual, I'm getting married today, putting on my pretty outfit, walking down the aisle. The marriage is everything that happens afterward, till death do us part, you know? That's kind of the real deal, you know? That's where, you know, you start to see everybody's, you know, your partner's kind of ugly, you know, in the morning, or, you know, they get a spot. Do you still love them? You know, they kind of have bad breath or, you know, weird habits. And do you still love them, you know? Okay, they're married now. And yes, they have an argument, a disagreement, and it is about intimacy. He ends up leaving. He gets rejected, and he doesn't leave like, I'm leaving you. I don't think so anyway. It doesn't seem that. I think he's just upset, and he kind of goes out to the pub, something like that. I'm just saying that. It doesn't say that in there, okay? So in chapter 5, verse 6, she is sort of rejected him. She goes out to find him because she feels kind of bad. And at first she can't find him, and then she does. And she remembers how much she loves him, and they come together in the end, okay? So that's the plot of what's kind of going on in this love poetry. So here are the stages. I talked about the structure of the growing love from the beginning, from, ooh, you're good looking, to, wow, we're married, you know? So the stages of that and how it grows. So we start out with initial love, okay? Chapter 1 sees the object of her affections. The Shulamite sees Solomon, and she is smitten. My goodness, she's a very honest woman, you know, in a time when it was a man's world. So, you know, I kind of applaud this woman on a little bit of a feminist level here, that, you know, she spoke her mind. She saw him and she said what she thought. She was very uninhibited. So she says in verses 2 and 3 that the young ladies love talking about him. So she's pointing out that, ooh, she's seen the guy who's, you know, kind of a catch around town, and all the young ladies kind of talk about him, and I kind of have a crush on him because, wow, you know, he's something. So in verses 5 and 6 of chapter 1, she's apologizing that she doesn't look her best because she's been working in the field. She's probably sweaty and a little bit smelly, and her hair's all over the place. But you know what? He calls her the fairest of women. You are beautiful, he says. It's all about the introductions, this first part, this initial love, and their initial words to one another. You know, how they say, wow, you know. I guess in today's language it would be, ooh, you're a hottie. Yeah, you're a hottie too, you know. That's even worse than the message, right? More, you know, street than the message there. Okay, so we go from that initial meeting to a bit of the, you know, the dating years to a little bit of faltering love. Okay, yes, faltering love. And that would be from chapter 2 to about chapter 3. So between 2 and 3. Things between them are still good, but her brothers, remember the keepers of her purity, and they love her, you know, they love her, and they are looking after this relationship, making sure it doesn't go wrong. In chapter 2, verse 15, the brothers say this, and this is pointing out to the wisdom in this book that you could almost miss because of its beautiful language. And they say this, catch us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our vines have tender grapes. Now what they're saying here, the brothers, are the little foxes are those little things in a relationship that could spoil the beauty of that relationship. Catch those little foxes. Don't let those little foxes nibble at the vine of love in your life. You know, and how easy, you know, those little foxes, you know, think about it, a beautiful garden. Every day you come, I guess here in England, we'd look at it more like slugs, okay? We have this beautiful, I have a herb garden, okay, where I've planted some beautiful stuff in there. And there's some mint, and I've got some rosemary, and I've got some thyme and basil. Oh my goodness, the slugs love the basil, okay? Anyway, every day I go out and I look at this beautiful garden. It's getting lush and it's gorgeous, and then, you know, this beautiful wet weather we have in the UK has really been good for the herb garden. But every day I go out and there's a little bit of less of it. And every day I go and there's just, I look at the leaves, there's a few little holes in the leaves. And the next day there's a few more holes, and until all my mint is gone. Boy, they really like the mint too. And then all my basil's gone. The little foxes, the little slugs in my case here. And they nibble at the vines, those tender, beautiful grapes, the beauty of what love is. And you know what that tells me? Here's that relationship. That it's not necessarily the big things in a relationship that blow up the relationship, but it's all the little things, all those little things that your husband or your wife has been doing that have been annoying you during your COVID lockdown. That's right. Okay, I'm going to touch on some deep stuff here. You know what really gets me? When there is wetness on the toilet seat because someone did not lift the toilet seat. I hate that. I begin to seethe. I hate having to clean it all and wipe it all down all the time, or worse yet, in the middle of the night, sitting in it, okay? Because you didn't know it was there. Awful stuff, little stuff. Okay, this one, I'm sure many can relate here, many married couples, the toothpaste cap. Okay, when I find the toothpaste cap sitting gently next to the toothpaste tube, I think, what is that about? Somebody couldn't put that back on there? It's usually the kids, but anyway. It's the little things, but can I tell you something? I'm wrong to let that eat away at the love in my heart for my husband. You know, those are little things. And you know what can cure those little things? Communication. You know, I don't have to go and scream and say, why don't you lift the seat, or why don't you put it? I'll just say it. Could you please put the toothpaste cap? Or one of my favorite little things to do is put a little note. Please put the toothpaste cap back on. Kiss, kiss. You know? There's nothing wrong with communicating, but also be ready for your spouse to communicate back to you the things that you do, because yes, I'm not perfect either. I do wrong stuff. I do annoying stuff. You know what really annoys my husband? What annoys my husband is when I don't put my hair implements, all my curlers and hair things. My dresser is on his side of the bed. So sometimes if I'm lazy and I leave all my hair dryers and my straighteners and my curlers out and all the wires are on his side of the bed, it's like he has to walk through a jungle of wires to get to his side of the bed to go to sleep at night. And he's tripping and they're falling everywhere, and it's annoying, and I know it, and I do try to put them away. So where I know I'm not perfect, I try to have grace for his not perfect. And that's what we need to have for one another. Good communication and lots and lots and lots of grace for one another, okay? Don't let the little foxes, Don't let them ruin the whole beautiful vine of your love. It is not worth it. Okay, so good advice from the brothers here. Okay, so now we go to the stage of growing love. All right, their marriage is mentioned in chapter 3, verse 6 through chapter 5, verse 1. Yes, there's a wedding that happens. Okay, and mostly you're going to read about that wedding in chapter 3, verses 6 through 11. There's a wedding couch that Solomon has made up. What is a wedding couch? Some of you or your Bibles are going to say a palanquin. Okay, what is a palanquin, especially if you're reading it like in the New King James? Basically, a palanquin or wedding couch. You've seen them in movies. You've seen them on, it's like a big, beautiful coach that's on poles. And like about 6 very strong men will carry these poles. And inside is the bride or the, or someone of royalty who can be carried in this. And Solomon has one of these beautiful palanquins or couches made up for his beautiful bride. And she is put inside this beautiful, she gets to travel up to her wedding in this gorgeous golden thing, palanquin couch that he made for her because she is special, and I guess it's her version of a beautiful limousine. Okay, so the wedding is discussed, and it's a lovely wedding. It says something about his mother crowns him, I guess his wedding crown on that day, and it's a lovely day and it's beautiful, and they mention it here, and it's beautiful. So pretty much from this point, it's all honeymoon, okay? So it can get a little, sexual from this point on, right? So chapter 4 is the consummation of the marriage. So like I said, from this point is a picture. It's just, their love is just growing by leaps and bounds. And oh my goodness, because now they have the rest of their lives together in marriage to discover one another, love one another, spend time with one another, okay? So from this point, the opposite of the negative beliefs of marriage you're going to see, okay? That what I'm saying by the opposite you're going to see is in the world, like I said before, sometimes it is the deep belief of people that marriage is the end of all fun, it's the end of good times, and it's the end of, your crazy single life, and that actually you're going to miss that crazy single life and, shed a little tear. But from this point on in the wedding, no. Things get hot and steamy, but not just hot and steamy, their love grows. So it's not just about an act of sex. It's about love growing in this. And as love grows, so do their metaphors and the things they say about one another. And it just grows and grows and grows. It's a mutual and a tender love from the imagery used. And the language used in the poetry, it's very sexual, but it's not portrayed as erotic, okay? Because when you hear the word erotic, it invokes thoughts of something being dirty, something being lustful, something you do in the dark, some kind of dirty magazines you hide in a dark place so nobody can find them because they're disgusting. No, not here. Not here. It is described as pure. Their love is pure and honest to one another. And just the imagery, again, life-giving, beautiful. Beauty is flowing from both these individuals toward one another. Chapter 4, verse 7 says, and I love this verse, okay? The man says this to the woman. Okay, Solomon says this to his bride. You are all fair, my love, and there is no spot in you. He's saying you are perfect. Oh, you are perfect. Here, you can see how this can be seen in an allegorical way as Christ, our husband, loving the church, his bride, because this is how Christ sees his bride. If you are one of his children, if you have accepted Jesus into your life and you are one of his, you are his bride, and he sees no spot in you. You are perfect, okay? That is how he sees you. I'm going to read you something from the book of Ephesians that Paul writes from the New Testament. Ephesians 5:22 through 23. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might present her to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she should be holy and without blemish. And that's how this husband is looking at this wife in Song of Solomon, but that is how Christ looks at us. That's right. You know, you might wake up one day and feel like, I am the dirt of the earth. I'm a horrible person. Oh, the things I've done. How could you love me? If you're his, you are just one line away from complete forgiveness. All you have to say is, forgive me. Everything is washed clean. Everything. Everything. His blood is more perfect and more beautiful and more powerful than any substance that has ever been or that will be. And it doesn't matter how deep and how horrendous your former life was. I don't care what you did. I don't care what you did. The blood of Jesus is enough to wipe away every sin and to make you so pure, you're whiter than the whitest snow. So that when he looks at you, you are just reflecting the purity of Christ. And that's what God sees in you as his bride. Okay? We are his bride. So this section, the love is growing. The beloved says, the husband says, in chapter 4, verse 9, you have ravished my heart, my sister, my spouse. Now, he doesn't mean my actual sister, okay? And there's a point in the book when she says, she refers to him as, oh, I wish you were my brother. Now, the reason for that is a cultural thing. And the fact that when she says, I wish you were my brother, because it wasn't acceptable for a husband and wife to be hugging and kissing outside. It just wasn't. But it was okay with family members, like a brother or a sister, to run up to a brother and just put your arms around and give him a big old kiss on the cheek or whatever. That was acceptable. So at one point she says, oh, I wish I can show you a public display of affection, but I can't. So I wish. But here he's just saying, my sister, my spouse, you know. He's just speaking in very poetic words. This is not actually his sister, okay? You have ravished my heart. And he goes on, etc., of how beautiful, how gorgeous, how much of his heart she has taken, okay? And remember, how beautiful is that? You have ravished my heart, my sister, my spouse. This is the words of Christ to his church, to his bride. Did you ever think that God loves you so much that he looks at you and says, you have ravished my heart? My lovely one. Oh, you are beautiful. You know, this is what he says to us. Stop looking at yourself as this ugly, you know, at the beginning she's like, oh, but I'm embarrassed about my little sunburn here and, oh, you know, and I'm a little sweaty and a little smelly. You know what? In Christ, you are beautiful. The fragrance of Christ comes off of you. The beauty of Christ, the perfection of Christ. This is what he sees, okay? You have ravished his heart. The Shulamite, the woman, responds to his lovely words. Let my beloved come to his garden and eat its pleasant fruits. That's chapter 4, verse 16. You know, she invites him into intimacy. You know, and this is our relationship with Christ, okay? It's beautiful, it's pure. And he's looking at you as beautiful, as lovely. You've ravished his heart. And she says to him, come into my life and just come into the garden of my love. You know, I look at this as our personal time with Jesus. Do you have personal time with Jesus? A relationship in a marriage. This is why it's looked at like marriage. If you didn't have personal time together in a marital relationship, it's going to fizzle. It's going to not have these feelings of love and being overwhelmed. And God will always love you. But, you know, our hearts can grow cold. Our hearts can grow further away. And we don't want that happening in our relationship with God, okay? You want to be inviting him in to the garden of your love, into your personal time where it's just you and Jesus, and he can talk to your heart like no one else. He knows you from the inside out. You know, his love is so personal, so bespoke. And he knows what you need even when you don't know what you need. Okay. Then the love is transforming love. Chapter 5, verse 2 through chapter 8, the final chapter, verse 5. In this section, you will definitely see the words of affirmation one to another, and it steps up. Okay, I'm coming to an end here soon. It's not far off. Also, the metaphors for their sexual activity, they increase and their love is deepening. Again, marriage today is seen as something, that brings staleness to a relationship. If you want to ruin a beautiful, exciting relationship, then get married, okay? That's a philosophy of this world. But here we see a married couple, and things are steamier and more exciting than ever, embarrassingly so, almost, to the reader, to many scholars who didn't want this book in the Bible. I'm not even going to read some of that stuff out. I'm going to leave that for you to read, okay? Yeah, that's right. Chapter 5 through the end to chapter 8, all right? Then, yes, there's a little bit of trouble. I mentioned it before. A little trouble, falls into their marriage. Yes, it's a love poem, but we see trouble. But this sort of makes it relatable, right? Because into every marriage, you're going to have disagreements. You might have full-on arguments, okay? Chapter 5. Verses 2 through 8. The husband is knocking at the door, and he's looking to be intimate, but she makes some excuses. Can I read these excuses? Oh, she says, I've already taken my robe off, meaning I've already taken my day clothes off, and I'm wearing my pajamas. Or this one, man, Solomon, I've already washed my feet. Okay, have you heard that one? And he ends up leaving, just going away. She rejected him. He doesn't make a fuss and scream. She just opens the door because she changed her mind, and he's not there. And she's looking for him frantically. She's like, where are you? Where are you? Oh, love of my life, where are you? Looking everywhere. Chapter 5, verse 9. She begs the daughters of Jerusalem, remember them, the friends, to help her find him. She says, I can't find him anywhere. And they ask her this question. What's so great about him that you're looking for him so frantically? Now, I've kind of made that in my own language, but in chapter 5, verse 9, they do ask that question. So, what's so great about him that you're looking for him? In chapter 5, verses 10 through 16, the Shulamite then begins to answer that question and talk about how great her husband is and all the wonderful things she has to say about him. She's reminding herself as she's speaking these things out about how blessed she is to have him as her husband and all the wonderful attributes, even just his physical attributes, his strong arms. Oh, I love him, I miss him, But she rejected him, and because she forgot how great he was in that moment, and that she needed to remind herself of all his good qualities. And when she does that, she's back. She's like, I need this man. I love him. Where is he? Where is the love of my life? Because, and again, and I look at this as wisdom, as the wisdom that can come from this book. Sometimes we are just so hyper-focused on the negative things because, let's say, we're in lockdown and we're just around each other a little too much. But maybe, maybe it hasn't been locked down and there were some things beforehand. Nobody's perfect. I get that. I'm not perfect. My husband's not perfect. And so together, two imperfect people are trying to have this perfect relationship, okay? But what you can do, and what I do, and what my husband needs to do, is we need to remind ourselves of why we fell in love, of the good things we see in that person, of the wonderful attributes of that person, the things that bless our lives, the beautiful little things. Go through old boxes of love letters and read those. Take out an old wedding video, watch it. Remember your love. Remember your love. In the book of Revelation, one of the problems with one of the churches was that they lost their first love. Maybe that's what's happened. You've lost your first love. You forgot that newness of life. Sometimes we look at new lovers. I have a son who's getting married in a few weeks' time, and his fiancée, and I look at their Instagram and things, and sometimes I think, oh, how sugary sweet. Oh, it's like, oh, some people might, I don't do this because I think it's sweet and cute, but some people have been known to go, they make me sick, those two. But you can learn something. I can learn something from new lovers, from people who are, just on the brink of getting married. Watch how they are with each other. Watch the things they do, the things that we don't do anymore as maybe married couples, been married a long time. No more love letters, no more flowers, no more chocolates. Why not? When did that stop? Start it up again. Write a love letter. Look into that loved one's eyes and say, I love you. Awkward? Yes. Weird? Yeah, probably a little at first. But you know, you love each other. And you know, you have to remind yourself of the reasons. You know, the reasons that you fell in love. And like this couple, and like marriage in the Bible is meant to be, it's meant to go from glory to glory, from strength to strength. All right? We're not meant to go from strength to you know, the old ball and chain. No. You know, it's meant to be like our relationship with God. You know, moving ever upward, getting better, getting more beautiful, growing, maturing, just beautiful. Okay. So she talks herself back into all the wonderful things again. She reminds herself. And the good news is he comes back and she's happy and she's all lovey-dovey again and the relationship's all good again. Also, you're going to notice in Song of Songs that we see each person, the Shulamite and Solomon, in this relationship only through the eyes of one another, only through those two characters. We see Solomon through the eyes of the Shulamite and the Shulamite through the eyes of Solomon. And they don't allow outsiders into their relationship. And it's very evident that these two have such value on the relationship that it's completely exclusive. No one else matters. And it's not that in marriage no one else matters in our marriages. We need wisdom from our pastors, from our people who love us, the people who might see things in our marriages that they point something out to you. You know, it's okay to listen to those people, but ultimately it's the two of you in the marriage, and there's exclusivity. It's just you have eyes for them and they have eyes for you, and that's it, okay? Mark 7:10 says this, "For this cause this is from the New Testament about marriage, for this cause shall a man leave his father and his mother and cleave to his wife, and the twain shall be one flesh. So then it is no more twain, not two anymore, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Now in that verse is the word cleave. You leave your parents, you leave, and you cleave to your wife, okay? Cleave means to adhere to stick to, or to join with. So in your marriage, you are stuck to that other person, like glued together. In our relationship with God, that's how it's meant to be. We are glued to Him. We are one, the two. There's no more two, but the two have become one, okay? In marriage, and with God, and in marriage to your spouse. And if you don't get that cleave part correct, you know, then you're going to have trouble with intimacy. If you don't cleave from the world in your relationship with God, if you don't fully cleave from it and adhere fully to God, you are going to have trouble with intimacy with God, with having that garden time with God where it's just you and Him, because you're bringing the stink of the world, the stink of other things you love more. You know, if you brought that into your relationship in marriage, you know, I love you, but I do have this, I text this other woman sometimes because she makes me feel so special. No, leave and cleave. And that's what the Bible says. That's how marriage works best. That's how intimacy works best, okay? And that is God's way. So you got to get the leave and the cleave part right, okay? Again, if you have messed up in this area of your life, you've messed up, you've invited others into your marriage, you might have had cheating in your marriage, or as a Christian, you realize, you know, you do have little dalliances with the world here, and you need to cut ties with the world, with the worldly things you do, with the things that God's not pleased with. No condemnation in Christ. You ask Him to forgive you. You ask your spouse to forgive you. You might need to, you know, as a married couple, you might need help. You might need to go and get professional help. Do it. It's worth it. That relationship is holy and good, and you might need help. Go for the help, okay? Get the leaving and the cleaving part right. All right, we're coming in for love. We're talking about, this is the very end, chapter 8, mature love, okay? They've been married for like a while here at this point by chapter 8. And in chapter 8, verse 5, they're reminiscing about how they met under this apple tree. Oh, do you remember, sweetie? Oh, I remember, honey. Yeah, it's cute, you know. You need to do that. You need to reminisce. Like I said, talk about the days when you were younger and you did cute things and you ran through the fields of daisies together. You got to remember those times. In Song of Solomon, chapter 8, verses 6 through 7, in the concluding thoughts on love and marital love, some of the most beautiful words of the book, where the Shulamite says this. She says this to her husband. "Place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm. Basically, she's saying, you know, in olden days, in these times, a king would use his seal. He'd put wax over something and stick his seal upon it, saying, that belongs to me. That is mine. She's saying, my heart is yours. Put a seal upon my heart, that it will always be yours. It speaks of permanence, okay? It speaks of the permanence of her love for him and of his love for her. And she says, for love is as strong as death. Okay, death is the strongest power in the universe, outside of God. And when death visits a person, no one can reject it. Death comes and death takes you. It captures you, and when it does, you belong to it. And this, in a positive sense, she's saying love is as strong in that same way as death. When love came for me, about you, I was taken fully and completely, and there's no going back. It's jealousy as enduring as the grave. And by jealous here, she means not, oh, that horrible, destructive thing of jealousy of, ooh, you have this and I want that. No, no, no. Jealous here means unrelenting desire. When the Bible speaks of like God is a jealous God, it just means that he has unrelenting desire for us. He wants us, and he wants us in a way where we belong to him and our eyes are single for him. And she's saying love is jealous, as enduring as the grave. Again, meant in a positive sense, you know. I have unrelenting desire for you, just like death desires to take us one day. My love is in that same way, with that same strength. And the Bible teaches us, you know, that God is a jealous God, and that we are to have no other gods before him, okay? So this is really the end. So again, we can have that God is jealous over us in that same way. And then she says, love flashes like fire, the brightest kind of flame. And some versions say the most vehement kind of flame, meaning the fire of the emotion of my love. It's strong, it's vibrant, it's forceful, it's passionate, okay? This speaks of in our love relationship with God. You know, it says in Matthew 24:12 that in the end times, the love of many will wax cold toward God. You know, fire needs feeding. A fire in a relationship of marriage needs feeding. You'll see the lovers in the poem feed each other with beautiful words of affirmation. You know, gifts, from verbal gifts. They say things of beauty. Be speaking love to your spouse, kindness and love. And in our relationship with God, you know, just the same way, you must be feeding and spending time with God to feed that fire of love. The very end here. Many waters cannot quench, nor can rivers drown it. Love, that is. If a man tried to buy love with all his wealth, his offer would be utterly scorned. You know, love is something that is given. It is not bought. You know, this world says you can buy the experience of love. That's lust, okay? To buy an experience, let's say with a prostitute or in some way like that, that is not love, okay? You cannot buy what real love is. You can buy a sexual act, but you cannot buy love, okay? And in chapter 8, verse 14, this is the real end. Marital relationships are to be. This is what God meant it to be. Till death do us part. And that's supposed to be a good thing, not a life sentence to endure. You know, the final book of the verse ends like this. Chapter 8, verse 14, final verse. Make haste, my beloved, the woman is saying this. Make haste, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountains of spices. And what a great way to end the book. Exonerating marriage, a joyous invitation she's giving to her lover, to her husband, to, you know, okay, I know you have to go now and go do what you do, go to work, go to this, go to that, but come back quickly because I love you. I want to spend time with you. You're my friend. You're fun. The rest of my life is an open invitation to spend it with you in love till death do us part. And that's what our relationship also with God is. It is actually till death do us part and beyond with God, okay? With the Father. And that's when the real stuff begins with our Father God. But today I'm going to end it here because I've gone a little over. And I just want to say, don't let the book of Song of Songs be something that you go, I'll skip that one. Yeah, that's a little bit saucy. You know what? It can be saucy, but it also speaks of the intensity and of love and of our love of Christ for his church. And if you're in a married relationship, or if you want one day to have a married relationship, or if you're in one, this is the prototype This is what God says. He's no prude. He invented marriage. He invented everything that goes with marriage. And don't let the world dictate to you or to me or to our children what love is. Be speaking about it to your kids and to your spouse, because real love is made by God. Real love is God. Okay, I want you to have a great week. I hope you enjoyed that.